I've decided that it's now time to share my story. I don't want to be one of those people where I have lots of stories and things to tell people and share, but I never get round to it in my life. That wouldn't be a good thing. I'm kind of setting myself up to fail if I have that approach, I think, so I just get down to what's important, really. Yeah, I'm worried that I'll die and my stories will go with me. To be honest, for a long time, I didn't want to tell too many people too many of the things that I'd experienced because, even if it's as plain as day, they'll say, oh, you're just seeing things or you're just trying to make out something that's not really there. It's kind of annoying, really. But yeah, I know I've not got that many years left to live. I've had a good life and I guess one that I eventually found a lot of happiness in. So for my job, for quite a while, I actually used to have to go out and rescue people. Every so often, people would wander off into the woods basically and become completely lost out in the snow, and it was my job to go and rescue them. Well, there was a few other people that we worked with in the teams, and I'd like to share some of the weird experiences that we had, and some things that I saw that I think might be interesting to you all. So let me cast you back now. We're sitting at the station, and we don't have any call-ups, so we go home. We are actually able to get contacted while at home though, so we knew it wasn't completely being out in the clear. I mean, basically you had to be close enough to the job that you could actually go back if you needed to actually go and make a difference with things. So I get back home and it's one of those drives where that I kind of need the time just to think clearly. Like the nighttime drives people do. I think I used any time that I was driving just to sit and reflect in silence. I found a lot of peace from doing this, really. So yeah, that's how I was getting on with things. Now after not too long of doing this, I get back home and I feel quite happy. I get in though and realise that the heatings went off, but that doesn't matter. I can start the fire, so I quickly go outside to get some wood and things, and I start doing that. While I'm out there, I'm met by another person. I say, hey, how are you? Just trying to be nice. I realise that he hasn't replied and I look up again and that person is gone. I think that's odd. I thought maybe it was a new neighbour who was just nervous about being there or something. I don't know, people get weird though sometimes. Especially when you live in a place where there aren't too many other people around. I don't know why, it's just an opportunity for some people to be quite weird, I guess. So anyway, I get the wooden things that I need and I just start cracking on. I head back inside and I start making my fire. It's quite a nice one. I go lay down in my chair and I wake up to a phone call. I open my eyes and the fire's quite big now. I'm kind of glad that I woke up. I need to tend to it and poke it back into place. The place that I live in isn't designed very well and it's probably a big fire hazard. I think today you wouldn't be allowed to design things like this, but basically if you put enough wood into the fire and it becomes big enough and you don't control it, it kind of spreads out and it's quite close to the wooden floor. I'd actually seen it melt some things before and it wasn't very good. So after doing that, I quickly go over and pick up the phone. They say, hey, we got something we need you guys to come back for. Can you do it? I say, I don't know. I'm pretty exhausted at this point. I noticed that I was getting a strange feeling in my neck and feeling breathless, and it's one of the signs that I'm actually a bit exhausted. So with this in mind, I say, is there no one else that can do it? I know some people are probably thinking, oh, that's not a kind and caring person, but honestly, if you're to do a job like this and you understand that yes, you give your life to this thing, but you also get exhausted from it. I think burnout with these kinds of jobs is very common and I was definitely feeling it that day. But they haven't got anybody else who can go out to help the team, so I kind of reluctantly agreed. So I now basically pack up all of my things and quickly put out the fire. I'm a bit anxious about putting out the fire though, to be honest. I just have a bad feeling this time. I don't know why, I just couldn't really shake it. But I get everything together and head off. I grab a newspaper because I know I'm probably going to be bored at some point during this and we're going to have breaks, so that's fine. Annoyed that I forgot my coffee, I curse a little bit but head into my truck and get going. The lighting seemed worse this time on the way back, but I put it down to the fact that I was most definitely tired at this point. I was just tired of all kinds of things, really. I needed a break, but here I am, still going, still pressing forward, trying to tell myself that I'll get a break soon. But I just keep on and on getting called out, and it's just not good enough. But hey, I signed the dotted line, nobody had me at a knife point doing so I go. It's probably good it was a bit of a drive for me to get there, because I think this definitely helped calm me down in the process. Yeah, I needed that really, just to be able to calm down enough to actually get out and start to do things. So yeah, I feel a bit better when I actually arrive back and we get the download. Apparently somebody is injured out there. They might even have thought that a bear attacked them or something. They had reports of screaming and then some blood trails, but that was all they knew. I think to myself, great. Is this it? Is this the end? I was jokingly thinking of this unoptimistically to myself, but there was actually some truth to the sarcasm of which overcast my mind at that moment. I felt like I was kind of spellbound to have something bad happening. Do you ever get moments in your life where you feel like everything's playing out like it's some kind of movie or something, and you're just watching it play out in front of you and you know things are going to happen but you don't have control of it? Yeah, it's kind of like that. The next thing I knew, I was out there. I'm walking up a snowy staircase. We basically have a staircase which leads us out into the part of the forest which is designated for us, the rescue workers. It's basically from here that we can go further and further in, much further than other people are allowed to go. In fact, when you get to the end, there's a sign saying stop, turn around, no civilians. Of course, I have to ignore this and just go through, so that's what I started doing. As I closed the gate and I turned around, I could swear that there was somebody who was standing at the very far end of where I'd come from, just kind of motionless. I thought maybe it was a civilian or something. I mean, civilians could come up to this point, so I didn't have a problem with it. But I thought, oh man, I just hope that there's nobody else to get lost out here. My self-talk was pretty atrocious at this point, but there wasn't too much of which I could do in particular to change it. So here I am, off I go, into the snow. The snowfall at this point was really beautiful. I should make note of that. When there's enough wind, it kind of just dusts off the top layer of snow, and it's really a beautiful thing. It kind of looked good here. I start to relax a bit and head off in the general direction. Now the thing is, we didn't really use radios. The technology wasn't so great at the time for these, at least where we were, because of the thick trees and stuff. But I didn't have an issue with this. I knew the area well, very well. In fact, that's how we were trained back then, to become expert navigators of the landscape, so that way we could go on regardless of not knowing exactly where we were, but having bearings and landmarks with us at all times. So that was fine. So I'm heading down and the wind picks up a bit with some snow. Every so often it's like my vision goes for a second because of the snow picking up. I start to think I've got to be really careful if there is a bear out here. I actually have a rifle on my shoulder, but the thing is I hadn't really shot one for a while. I wasn't so sure I knew exactly how to use it safely, and I wasn't sure it was a high enough caliber to take out a bear. I remembered one of my other colleagues telling me that if you get into a bear situation, just shoot it between the eyes. That's okay, but what if you miss, I thought. We had the bolt action one, so that's at least a second gone there in between rounds. Then, oh no, I haven't loaded it. I quickly put a few rounds in and put the safety off. This is probably the dumbest thing I did, because I had a loaded rifle which would occasionally point towards my head, but I didn't realise this until after the fact. So I'm walking round, and every so often I can hear a weeping kind of moan. I don't know what it is. It's definitely spooky though. I thought maybe there was an injured person around. I go to call out to ask if they want help, but I don't get a reply. I go to do it again, and furthermore there's no reply. So I'm just thinking to myself, well, I don't know what's happening now. I want to call out, but I can't for some reason. It kind of feels like I'm being stalked or hunted. Yes, that's it. The feeling of being hunted now. Gosh, it's well and truly not a nice feeling to have. This goes on for a little bit longer, and I'm now walking in somewhat deeper snow. I slip down a bit, but quickly steady myself, and I think I see something moving. There's some movement in the tree line, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Then I hear it. This time it kind of sounds like thunder or something, but there's no thunder above. Odd. It's kind of like if you've ever watched one of those really old horror films, and every so often they have the thunder and lightning and whatnot, and you're thinking, oh yeah, something bad's about to happen. But that was creepy. You know what, I'm gonna say it, that was the scariest moment of my life. Constantly hearing thunder of which I could not explain whatsoever. It was almost like there should have been something, but there just wasn't. And it kept happening every so often, almost like a monster was about to jump out and get me. But it didn't happen, so I press on. I'm going a bit further along now. And every so often parallel to me, I can see snow being disturbed on some of the trees. But I can never see what's the source of this. My presumptions, of which I believe are correct potentially, are that it's a fox or some kind of animal like that. I don't know. Just something. But I guess I tell myself that at the time just to try and make sense of this. Well, I don't know what these are. So I keep going. Then I see it. A very faint pinkish colour in the snow. It's going off of the area that I'm in, so I now make a diversion in order to follow it. I watch this for a little while, and it doesn't seem to be picking up much. Every so often it seems to be a bit more strong, but I now notice a strange yellowish colour in the snow too. So yeah, I keep going and just following this, and I realise that every so often there's a splotch of blood. Okay, that's not very good. I know something's definitely up now. I know I'm definitely getting close. The problem is, in this situation, I don't know for sure whether I'm actually hunting something or whether I'm actually finding a person. The problem is, in this kind of state of fear, you can be very likely to take shots or do things that you wouldn't in other circumstances. So I'm definitely a bit more anxious now than I probably should be. I'm just worried that I'm going to be trigger happy. I'm going to say it now. I'm probably the most trigger happy person in the world. Even if things made me jump while we're practicing on the gun range, I would always take a shot, almost an instinct. I decide to put the safety on now, and I take a round out or two. I'm just worried that I'm just going to empty this clip and either run out of ammo or shoot a poor person who might already be injured. I've seen a car crash once, so I should be prepared for what I see, right? Well, I keep going. There was something extremely unsettling about following a blood trail like this. It almost feels like there's a picture being painted in front of you. You're basically following the breadcrumbs of some kind of monster. At least that's how I felt. I didn't notice it again until afterwards, but there's no footsteps to go with this blood. There just seems to be blood going further and further into the woods. It doesn't pick up enough though, and I'm still following it, and I've got to admit, I'm getting a bit annoyed now. I feel like, when is this thing going to show itself? Who's there? And I stop, and I can see that I'm in a cavern. I call out, hey, hearing my voice echoing off of the surrounding environment. I stop and call out, hey, once again. I'm trying my best to figure out if anybody's here. I say, hey, I know you're hurt, but I can help you. I've come here with supplies, food, everything. Just let me know you're here. I can help you. I don't hear anything, so I stop for a moment. Places like this are always quiet, but it felt awfully so now. It's strange, I oddly felt quite relaxed, almost like I was in some kind of dream. I think because I had the rifle I wasn't too worried at this point, but it was definitely odd. And now the blood trail has stopped. I haven't really got a choice though other than just to keep checking in the area. I do know roughly where I am, but the further I go, the more loose this knowledge becomes. The thing is, literally everything looks the same here, especially in the snow, so that's not helping now. There's no footprints around now other than my own, so I know I'm definitely not where I should be, but at least with the knowledge that I'm starting from zero, I know that I can keep going and hopefully get somewhere half decent in terms of progress, so that's what I'm doing. I get further and then decide that I'm going to give up. I've come quite far now. I've searched the area that I really need to, and there's no more blood. So I head back. Why have you done that? A voice in my head says. You shouldn't have given up on somebody like that. And I start to have strange visions. I have the vision of somebody bleeding. I can see them wandering around aimlessly and just covered in blood. I think that's odd. I still can't make sense of this. It seems like they're being hunted too, which is especially weird. They're going further and further. Then I snap out of it again. I think I should really get back now. I'm somebody with a relatively over-imaginative thinking pattern at the best of times, but this was a bit creepy to me. I'm going further and further now, and eventually I get back to maybe the halfway point. I'm battling two different voices in my head now. One's telling me that you're a coward, you need to stop and go back, but the other one's telling me just go, get out of here. I then notice that there's some more blood. This time it seems much stronger, and I'm a bit concerned now. I can see the blood going up into the hill a bit further from where I am, and some blood on the trees. This is definitely from a person. I'm getting creeped out now. I grab my hand and try and will myself forward, almost imagining that there's another person there with me. So I start to progress onwards. Now crash. I hear the sound as though somebody's fallen, and I drop to one knee with my rifle in hand. I scream out, "Hey," and again I'm met with more reverberations of my voice coming back to me, the only solace I have in this moment. Now I move along, and with my hands shaking, trying to see where this all leads to. I now have some kind of flash again. My vision goes for a second, but now I can see dogs, or more like wolves, looking very angry up ahead of me. For a second I think they're real, and I realise that I'm aiming at them, but then I flash back to normal and there's nothing there. But it follows the blood. It's like my mind's trying to tell me something. Wolves. There must be wolves out here. So I start going further, and I can hear wolves. Oh no, I think I must be in a bad area now. But I press on furthermore. The blood seems pretty bad. I know that I'm about to find a dead body. I get a chill up my spine as I realise this. The wind's picked up now, and it's kind of making a bit of a haunting sound. For reasons unknown to me, my legs feel extremely heavy at this point, and I really have to force myself up. I actually start using my hands on my knees to help me go further. I look at the blood on one of the trees and it looks fresh, and you can see the distinctive marks of somebody's forefingers. Oh god. I call out, "Hey, hey," somewhat getting angry this time. I force myself to go forward, really starting to feel sick now, and I have to keep swallowing to try and stop myself from vomiting. And now another flashback, and this one's so much more powerful than all the rest. I see it. Somebody being torn apart by dogs. I realise now they're wolves. Really going at them. This is a lot of blood now, and it makes me feel sick. I go back to normal and I'm frozen. I'm just coming up to the top now, and I'm scared to look down. I kind of fall at this point. I think it was almost like I kind of stepped forward, trying to get a foot in, but not realizing that the snow was quite soft and the ground was a bit further below it than I expected. And I start rolling down, tumbling now. I scream out, swearing, looking for my rifle. I punch the ground, then get up and quickly grab my gun again. I sweep it round and say, hey, hey, as I realize that there's more blood to my right. I turn around and that's when I see it. A body. A decomposing body in the snow. Though there's no blood around it this time. I think that's really weird. I think maybe more snow settled, so I walk towards it. I don't know why I was aiming my gun at it. I think it just made me feel a bit more safe. I kick the snow, but I can't get too close to it. I'm expecting to see some blood. Maybe there's a layer of snow covering it, but there's not at all. I do this for a while and do it in a semicircle, but no snow that reveals blood's underneath. Really strange. Now, I close my eyes for a second and I hear a terrifying scream, as well as some kind of howling sound. I turn around expecting to have to shoot some of these things, but there's nothing there. Then I realise that I can hear some kind of animal nearby. I don't know what animal it is, but just some kind of thunderous growling sound, which is not too loud but detectable, like it wants me to know it's there. So I start going backwards. I'm absolutely fixated on this person that once was. It really felt horrible seeing this here. I just couldn't look away from it, and it's the only time in my life that I've ever had this before. It's like I was so fixated on this person's injury that they must have had that I forget everything else. Before I know it, I'm falling backwards again. I slap my hands down, but it's too late. I start tumbling backwards again. I come to a stop and my rifle hits the back of my head. I curse now and grab the rifle. I go to load another round in, ready to be fully loaded now, but it jams. I say, no, come on. I hit it on the ground and it makes a light thud. It's still jammed. I say, come on, you've got to be kidding with me. But alas, I'm wrong. So I just get up and start walking. I'm doing a slow kind of military walk, half squatted down. I don't want to be seen. I keep scanning my horizon, but I can't see anything. I'm walking slowly backwards. I also notice that there's no more blood at this time. I put it down to maybe the snow, but I think that's quite weird. I should have seen some more by now. I keep turning back. I can hear the growling sound once more. I decide that I need to pick up the pace a bit now, especially because I'm getting cold from being on the floor. So I start to pick up a light jog. I'm not really aiming the gun now, it was making my arms hurt holding it that way, so I'm just kind of holding it like I'm in water. But then I can hear something, much closer this time, another snarling growl. It's starting to get dark now and I do start to panic. I let off a shot in fear. It was probably lucky that I still had the gun higher than I expected, because I probably could have just killed someone then. I now realise that the rifle's actually unjammed itself and I'm really happy. I quickly put another round in and I'm ready to fight now. I think the bravery took over for maybe 1 second, but then I can hear more growling. I start to pick up the pace more. It must be those wolves. They've got to be hunting me now. I never had a situation like this before. I can let off my warning shots, but I don't know what to do other than this. I wasn't really trained for this. The thing is, there's one of me, and these are pack animals. So what if they want me? That'll be it. They'll just kill me. And then there's no more John going around anymore. I start to tear up at the thought of this. The thought of people knowing what happened to me. I guess I can go up in a tree, but how long can I stay up there for? It's going to be really hard to climb up these trees. I don't think I have the strength for it, to be honest. So I keep going now. I decide all I can do is just let off a few shots, and that's what I keep doing. I'm down to 4 rounds now, and I know I can't do this the whole way. I think I'm going to get down to my last 2, because at least then I can probably maybe kill a couple of these things. Now I hear a wolf howl. I haven't heard this before, and it really scares me. It sounded so close. I quickly look around in all directions trying to find this thing, but I can't find anything. I punch down now in anger. I slowed the pace a bit. The pace I had would have been impossible to keep up with in the thick snow like this where I was now. But I keep going. Whenever I heard that they were getting close, I would let off a round. I've only got a few more left now. I have to conserve the ammunition. I don't understand why they couldn't give us more ammo. I mean, I know I'd let off a lot of rounds, but come on, we're out here alone. I start going further when I now see one finally. There is a wolf not far away. I've never seen one this close before, and this thing was absolutely massive. It was a greyish colour and it looked really horrifying. I can see some more around but not very clearly, but this one, it was terrifying. I aim just above the tree where it is and bang, I put a hole in the tree. This thing sprints off now, but I can't see the direction it's gone, so I quickly reload and start picking up the pace more. I know that there's definitely more than 3, but I've only got 2 bullets now. It's getting more and more dark, and I know my night vision's not going to be near as good as theirs, but I have to keep going. So I press on now. It's all silent for a little while. I hope that somebody heard my shots being ringed off, but again, we don't have the radios now, so it might not have been much use. The problem is too, it's going to be really hard to find where they come from. I just hope that somebody heard it and can come and help me. I now make it back onto the path. I crash through it, leaving it open, and I start walking. Every time that I hear my feet on that wooden board, it made me feel more and more comfortable and confident. I know that I'm not that far away now. I put the safety on finally and shoulder that thing and keep going. I've probably gone for about 30 minutes straight now. I can't hear any more animals, and I see some of the others. They look very panicked and rush over to me asking what's wrong. I just stand there for a moment and say, "Wolves, wolves, there's wolves out there," and they look concerned. One of the other guys goes out to get more guns, and now I have to show them where I found it, that body. I say there's somebody there, they're pretty beat up. They ask how bad is it, and I say, well, I don't think they're gonna make it. Now time is of the essence. I felt a lot better now having all 4 of us there together. They called our squad the Hunter Squad, which was kind of cool I guess, but I kind of felt like we were the pack animals now and not them, so we head out there. So we start going towards the very end of where that thing was, opening the gate again. That was some really weird thing that I've never been able to explain since actually. The gate had managed to close. I run through that, leaving it open basically, crashing, but it was closed. Strange, maybe it was just my momentum made it swing back, but I didn't hear anything. But I don't know, I could have been scared and not heard it. So now we go ahead. We're all pointing in different directions, and there's one of us going a bit slower checking our 6. This is really important. I don't have more than the 2 bullets with me now, but that's fine, we have quite a few. We've all got these rifles. They're not semi-autos, but they're pretty powerful, I guess. So we start going and I say, but there was blood here. There was literally blood here. I don't understand. But we keep on going. And I can't figure out where we're supposed to be. We now stop because we can hear growling and we get down into a formation. That's when I hear the first shot. I turn around to look where it's come from and there's another. I can then see my colleague shooting away. Bang, bang, bang. 5 shots are let off in total, and then there's silence. I look up and I can see some animals slouched over. There's at least 3 of their bodies and they look huge. I go over there, but my colleague stops me saying, "You're crazy, you're gonna get yourself killed, John." I say, "Yeah, you're right." And I start slowly turning back. We move up now and we keep going. I finally recognise where I was because of my own footsteps, but again, there's no blood, which is strange. I see, yeah, it's right there over the hill, and we make a formation up there. The team leader then goes down to investigate Mark. He's quite brave, I've got to give it to him. He used to be in the military, so he's not really fazed by much of anything. So he goes down. He gets further and further until he puts his hand up, signaling him for us to stop. At least that's what I think he's doing. It might be in a military thing, I don't know. He then goes over to where the body is, and he says, "Yeah, he's long gone." He puts his hand up, gesturing for us to come closer. We can now see that this person's probably been dead there for quite a long time. We decide that we're going to recover it the next day. It's too dangerous for us to be out there. I mean, it was good, don't get me wrong. We investigated, and we thought it was somebody potentially still with life to live, but for this person, sadly, it wasn't the case. My God, that's horrible what they do to them, I thought to myself, as we turn back around and start making our way back. We then get back to almost exactly the same spot where that we've been shooting them things, but we can't see any, which is really strange. We think maybe they've limped off or something, but my colleagues are certain that they put enough into them that they shouldn't have made it. It's really bizarre. We all look at each other confused, but decide to press on. We're still holding that formation, just not as tight. Because of getting a few of them and the sounds of our rifles, they've definitely fled now. We eventually get back in, and I get sent back home again. It turns out that they could never recover the bodies of those wolves. It's really strange. The other thing that doesn't make sense is I definitely saw some blood, but that body had been there for quite a while. So I just don't understand what could have happened in that case. It was really one of the most horrible things that I ever experienced or witnessed in my life, and I'm glad that I've never seen anything like it since. I work as a fire watcher in my native country. I'd done this for a large time in my life. I'd spent some time in the military too, well, about 2 years or so, but I always enjoyed my time out in the nature the most. Now, the area that I covered was very pretty. I'm actually from the area that doesn't have lots of hills and stuff, so being out in where the hills are and the mountains was something really beautiful. I remembered that I absolutely loved this place, but one day my perspective on it really changed. Now let me explain. The land of mine actually has lots of history. My grandfather had worked out here before, and apparently he said that there was lots of weird things that would happen. Apparently they'd report some kind of mysterious figure in white. It looked like a beautiful young girl with very long flowing hair. But apparently she would float through the woods, seemingly without interacting with anything, bouncing from side to side before disappearing, making eye contact with men. He told me that they never figured out exactly why she was out there, just that it had really scared them. Apparently somebody was actually murdered here long ago, and allegedly that was her spirit haunting here. Apparently she was looking for her missing partner or something, and that's what they thought was happening, that she was here, roaming around trying to haunt them. Now, I kind of believed it, and a lot of people in my family also did. When I was a kid, I was absolutely horrified about being out here. The problem was, when I was young too, I was bigger, so I didn't have much stamina. I would find myself getting out of breath just going up the trails and things and doing the hike to the different areas we would go. So I always thought that I was especially vulnerable if anything were to happen, and that made me really scared. I was convinced that one day something was going to try and get me. So, doing my work, I would often spend lots of time out there by myself or with a small team. The most important thing that we could do is just survey everywhere and make sure that there were no fires. I had a couple of big fires though that we had to deal with. Where I live, you also had to help put out the fire if you could. It was something we'd also do to help out the fire department when they got here. We had pretty limited resources, so it was really important that we would help out and try and make a difference. I was never too worried by these fires though. There was very scarce and sparse population here, so it was pretty easy to notify people in the surrounding areas. Usually the fires would just burn themselves out. I do remember one strange thing though. I remember once during one of the fires I was helping with, I could have sworn that I'd seen a figure in the fire. It was just standing there and kind of staring at us. I only saw it for about a second or two before it eventually gone back into the flames, but it sounded just like what my grandfather had described. We knew for a fact there weren't any people here, so we weren't too worried, but we did have a quick search around. Maybe somebody got lost out there. But this thing was floating. I never really put two and two together, so I can't be certain that I actually saw the same thing as my grandfather had, but my grandfather was convinced that I had from the way I described it. I was a little put off by the whole experience, to be honest, but let me get to my main story. Now, working out here one day, I remembered that my colleagues had reported a huge fireball. They basically reported to me what could only sound like a UFO, which had crashed off somewhere, and now it was up to us to go and investigate and figure it out. The good news for me is that there wasn't any fire out here, not that we could see anyway. This happened around nightfall. They basically said it kind of looked like a meteor or something, and they were very scared about going up there. I myself wasn't too scared about it for some reason. I just thought, I'm going to have a good hike through here, then eventually find it, and it will be something cool. Maybe something I could even take home, like a cool rock off the side of it or something. So I start my hiking, and it starts raining immediately, which again is a good sign, because if there is a fire, then we haven't got to worry too much. The rain was really going to help put it out. I remember when we started, I didn't bother looking about how far I had to go because it was quite some distance. I was on foot and had my radio, and eventually broke off from the other guys I was working with. I continue hiking and realise that I'm getting very out of breath. It was weird, it reminded me of when I was much younger and more unfit, but it was almost like any time I did an incline, I would really feel it. I wasn't even carrying that much weight on me too, and I thought I was pretty good and healthy at the time, but I guess not. It was kind of a wake-up call for me more than anything else though, because if there was actually danger, then I wouldn't have been one of the best people to help you, and I didn't like that. That didn't sit well with me. I needed to do as much as possible to help people, and I felt like I was letting down my community. Now, while hiking, every so often I can hear some faint cries. It was pretty creepy. It kind of sounded like an alien voice, to be honest, and I thought that was really weird. I wasn't really convinced there was an alien, but it was definitely a weird animal. Now, some of my colleagues actually reported this on the radios too, so I knew I wasn't the only one hearing it. I then go further and further, and I can actually see some of the trees have been scraped to the top, where obviously something crashed here, but I couldn't see anything. The cries stopped after a little bit, and I couldn't seem to locate them. I just knew it was definitely scaring me, because now it was getting to nightfall. There was some weird sound, and I wasn't sure what direction I was going in. It was kind of like the sound of something ticking over, like a constant click. It kind of sounded like an engine, but a little bit different. I also felt very uncomfortable now. The rain was giving me some kind of reassurance so weirdly. I don't know, it felt like everything else was eerily quiet. So having the sounds of nature, at least in some form, was definitely something I like to have. In this area, you can actually see pretty good through the woods. The trees were tall, but they weren't very thick. Also, the plants on either side of me only come up to about my knee height, so visibility wasn't too bad. It did mean that every so often I'd have to climb up a tree a bit to scan areas, but that was fine. I was still following the direction of the trees which were damaged, until eventually, I see something really creepy. Just up ahead, I see what I can only describe as some kind of demon. It looked like a tall figure, covered in some kind of black material, slowly lurching around. I dug down for a second and slowly lift my head up. I hear one more faint cry, and I can't figure out where it's coming from. I radio in my language that I've seen something very weird, and my colleagues respond and say that they're coming over. I was actually so scared that I stayed crouched down for another 10 minutes, and then I feel a hand touch my back. I feel like my heart stops and I have no pulse, as within a flash I turn around and it's my colleague. I swear at them and ask them, why did they make me jump like that? And they said they thought I was hurt. Did I truly look that scared? Maybe I did. I was getting paranoid now, but I decide to get up and we go towards where I heard the thing, but I don't see anything. We decide the best thing to do is to split up, and I continue going to where the UFO crash site is. I keep walking and lurching through the forest until eventually I see something smouldering off in the distance. All I can see is smoke at this point, and I think maybe there is a fire. I really don't know what to expect now. I really think that I'm about to be met by some kind of tall green or grey men. God knows what I've just seen. I have my Bible in my pocket and I'm clutching it very strong as I get closer and closer and start to pray. I seem to become stuck in quicksand though, and I just can't bring myself to move more forward. I had a strange sense of dread that I haven't had before, but eventually I managed to force myself to put one foot in front of the other and make my way over the horizon. Then I see it. Some kind of mangled up thing, covered by trees. It's kind of white and blue in colour, which I didn't expect, covered in some kind of black silk. It then becomes more apparent what I'm looking at. This isn't a UFO at all, this is a plane crash. Within a second, I realise what's happened, and I quickly scream onto the radio that we've had a downed aircraft here. What was it, a UFO? I say, no, it's one of ours. It's a small aircraft. I can see that this thing has come down and obviously set on fire. Then one of my colleagues screams, we found him. I ask what, but don't get a reply. I just sprint back to their direction. By the time that I've gotten over there, I can see my colleagues surrounding a person. They're covered in jet fuel and something else, and clearly it was a pilot with half of their hair burnt off their body. They absolutely look like an alien, and I suddenly feel very faint. I actually ended up passing out now, and I can't remember much else. I just know that about 20 minutes later I woke up again, and I seemed to have a dream. I had a really long dream, which is weird because I knew I was only asleep for 20 minutes or so. When my colleagues are pouring water on my head and waking me up. There's an emergency worker then too, who's a medic checking over me. He says, are you okay? And I say, yeah, I'm fine. And I have some sugary drinks, which one of my colleagues gave me, and some snacks, and I feel much better, though I'm covered in a cold sweat. I eventually get up, and we start walking back, and there's more police coming. Eventually we all make it back, and I get to go home early because of medical reasons. Now I never actually know what come of that pilot or the plane wreckage. I just know I can't believe how scary and inhuman he looked when we found him. Poor guy, I really hope that he's okay. It was easily the most scary experience in my entire life, one that I'm never gonna forget. One of the weirdest stories that I've ever heard happened is not my own, but my father's. My father works as a forest service worker, and he had many weird encounters over his years. This one in particular gave me chills all throughout my childhood, and it made me constantly just question things. Now, I'll tell this exactly how my father's told me and how that he's wrote it down for me, so sit back and enjoy. I think it's truly bizarre. Now, to start out, everything's going pretty well in life. I'm happy and my wife is now pregnant. Now this is going to be our second child. We already had our other one who's about 1 now, and we're really excited to have a second. We had a boy and we were hoping for another girl. It turned out that we had another boy, but that was just as much joy into our lives. Those who haven't experienced parenthood don't understand how it changes your life sometimes, and how it changes your approach to taking risks. I know that I certainly had the same feeling too. Now, where I was based at for my job, I didn't really encounter anything too heavy. I hadn't been working this role for that many years, and there was other more experienced guys out there. In fact, a lot of the time I'd actually get quite frustrated because I really truly wanted to do more, but I just wasn't able to. Sometimes there would be things that the other guys would know that I could do, and they would just rush off to do it before I had the chance to, and it was so frustrating. I enjoyed being out there, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of stuck doing more computer stuff and just, I guess, the boring things. Now, at this place, I knew that I could progress, but it was going to take years. They basically offered me all the training and everything, but my god, it was slow. The thing was, I was probably smarter than all of the people there, just not being given any opportunities that I needed to progress. It was almost like they'd given me this form, and it said everything I needed to do, but there were holes in it that they couldn't see, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I was quite tempted to join the Navy. I actually wanted to become a Navy SEAL at the time. It wasn't really possible because of some of the injuries I had, but I know that if I really pushed myself, I probably could have overcome them. But the problem was, even sometimes when I was doing this job, even just hiking around and doing my normal things, I would have a pain that I couldn't seem to stop from the bottom of my foot. I actually still have issues with it today. I'm not quite sure why it started, but yeah, it's just something I get on with. So on this particular day, it was just the same. There was more exciting call-outs and things to go and do, but literally before I could even get to the radio to say I would do it, someone would say I'm on it and would already be up there with their coffee in their hand, taking the last sips of their coffee before flying on out the door and to go and have all the fun. Yeah, it kind of really sucked doing this, but I guess it gave me more time to think and just relax a bit. The problem is, if you're like me, that time very quickly lends to boredom. I started going through some of the records and some of the reports. I basically had to reorganize them because some people in this office area, they would just throw everything onto a desk and not do anything. They would only look for items if they needed it, which of course is a very stupid idea and wastes everyone's time, but back in my day, I guess that's how it was. So I start reading through some reports. There was a few pretty creepy things on there. Some people would say that they had a feeling, like an intense feeling of fear that they couldn't describe, accompanied by a knocking on some of the trees. They were never able to locate the source of this sound, and they thought it was just animals, but it came up quite often over the years. Then I heard a really strange one. Apparently, there was a ranger that worked here, and a lot of the other people thought that he was going crazy. I was reading a second-hand account of what had happened to him. Apparently, something had spoke to him and told him the future. Weirdly though, when I looked back through another account, which was more recent than that one, some of the things that he said actually come true. And the person making the report actually noted that and how weird it was. Upon further investigation, it turned out that this person thought that he had spoke to beings or something. I don't know, kind of like aliens. They didn't describe it very well, just very vaguely. Now, it seems like many of these cases were dismissed. There were other weird things too, like a Pacific area where you'd feel very hot, completely unnaturally, to the point that you'd actually question if there was some kind of hot spring there, or something weird that shouldn't have been there, but again, they could never find the source of it. The thing that made this even more bizarre is that eventually the plants and trees and everything in the area would start to die, so you basically knew for certain that something was definitely off there. Now, I decided that I had to get out and do the very minimum just to not be in the office, and that's what I did. I remembered setting out, and I was being a little bit more paranoid than normal. I think all these stories were just playing in my head. I remembered I kept thinking that I saw something walking through the tree line above, ahead of me, always maintaining the higher ground. It kind of just trailed alongside me. It's really hard to describe, but was truly creepy. Now, I don't know what it was, but I think it was some kind of large animal there. Not big enough to be a bear, but certainly weird. I did think maybe it was a hiker out there, but it wasn't possible. I thought that was bizarre. I remember thinking to myself that you've just learnt the power of human potential in the mind, and it was pretty scary to me. Now, life goes on. We probably get to about a month or 6 weeks in, and again, they're just not training me properly. It's kind of really annoying because they'll complain at me for doing something when it's exactly how somebody's told me to do it. And they'll say, oh no, just do it confidently. But then they'll say, why did you do that? And you'll explain that's how you're trained, and they wouldn't seem to listen, and it was kind of like a hostile group. I didn't end up staying there for too long, but I'll get to that later. So what do? Once again, get reserved to balancing the books and just doing the normal work. Now, this is actually at a time before we had computers, so it did make days very boring too. The problem I found is that some people just did not have good handwriting. I've never been the best at reading others' handwriting, but especially in these situations, my god, it was like some of these people had honestly made an effort to write as illegible as possible. And again, if you can't read it, they complain, so I kind of become an expert of reading these things eventually. And again, every so often there's weird reports. I realise too, quite often when it's recorded, people just think, oh, it's the other guy not paying attention. Maybe he wants everyone to look at him and stuff like that. At least that's on the report conclusion, but I had a feeling that something was off when I kept on seeing the reportings of some kind of beings out there. This spanned over a number of years too, and long before I was there. They all seemed to be described as relatively the same. They called them the forest walkers. Apparently they seemed to be quite tall, and they would walk in almost a weird limp motion. The weird thing is that they would be silent too, and if you approached them, weird things would happen. Some people said they felt almost like they were high. Others said that they would just know things they couldn't have otherwise and stuff like that. I don't know if I believe in the supernatural that much, or at least at the time I didn't, but I just considered that these were just things that happen when you've been out in the woods for too long by yourself. Now eventually as time increased, and I started complaining to the higher ups about the issues I was having, I started to get out more and do more interesting things. I even got to rescue a few people too, which is a really cool feeling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but there's something so cool about knowing that you preserved human life. You stepped in and you made a big difference and impact for someone. It's not something I'd felt before in other jobs too, so I was quite happy. Now, as I go out for a patrol one evening, I remembered having a strange feeling that the air was different. There was almost some kind of metallic smell that I couldn't quite describe. I was concerned that I had some kind of illness or that I accidentally got something on my nose, but no matter how much I wipe my nose, I can't seem to get rid of the feeling. And there was almost some kind of static in the air. You know, like when you have static electric and just before you feel the buzz, it was kind of like that. Now that's when I feel something. I can tell something's looking at me and I stop to turn around and see what it is. And then I can make out some kind of figure. It's probably about 20 feet away. It's wearing kind of like a dark coloured robe, but when it gets closer it appears more white. It walks with a weird limp and I can't believe my eyes. I actually rub my eyes quickly, not sure for a second if I'm dreaming, and it's gone. Now I think this is pretty creepy. I want to figure out what this is, so filled with excitement I actually jogged towards where it was. Now I couldn't tell you too much else about it, but just that it completely vanished. I probably spent another hour myself actually searching the surrounding areas just to see if I could find anything there to explain what I'd just seen, but alas, I come up blank. There's nothing there but myself. Now I'm actually a little bit irritated because I don't want to seem stupid. I really don't want to become like one of the people whose stories I've read, probably to be dismissed later on the same way that I dismissed some of theirs. But currently, it seems like I'm going to have no option but for that to be the case for myself. Yeah, it sucked really. I go back eventually and tell them what happened. Now, no one believes me, which is what I expected, and they say, yeah, you're too junior to be going out there and investigating things like this. I was pretty fed up again. I come from a role before where I was very well respected, and honestly, the way I was being treated was really annoying me. Now, a few months go on, and it becomes winter, and the going gets a little bit more tough really. It was pretty cold out there. I mean, uncomfortably so for myself. Now, I remembered on one particular day, I can't tell you specifically what I was doing, I just remembered that I was out there, that I spotted something weird, I mean really bizarre. There were these small figures, kind of limping around in the woods, again silently. Now I can't believe what I'm seeing. They're probably about 5 feet tall now, and in more of a white coloured gown kind of thing. Like I said, I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe it was something from Halloween, like decorations people put out there. And I actually wasn't too scared now. I was convinced that this wasn't actually a real thing or threat or danger, so I decided to sit back and very slowly follow these things. Now I didn't look behind myself, so there could have been more, but these things just kept on marching on, kind of down the path for a good 10 minutes longer. Now they never once seemed to notice me or so much as turn around, so again, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing, but I think it's some kind of Halloween decoration that someone's playing around with. I don't know, it could be a cult, it could be anything, but I'm not too worried. I don't know if it was the size of them or what, but I just wasn't concerned. Also, there seemed to be nature interacting normally around, so that meant that these things weren't a threat, at least I thought. So this continues on until eventually they all stop at something. I stop too, and I can see about 4 of them. I was incredibly curious as to what they were looking at, but there's no real way for me to be able to see where I'm based currently. I get closer and closer and realise that I'm going to have to take the long way round now to figure out what it is. I decide to take a stealthy approach and I try and walk very slowly through the foliage and get around. I do make it to a pretty good horizon and I can see in front, and I still can't figure out what they're looking at. Now I'm sure these are people now, so I become a little bit more confident and I walk down even closer to where they are. Eventually, I ended up crashing through some of the brush and I decide that I'm going to be more present now. Obviously these people know that I'm here, so what's the point of trying to hide away from them? I go a little bit quicker now and eventually go round to where I think that they're facing, and I can't see their actual faces. It's kind of just dark where that their faces are completely covered up in something. Now I crouch down to get a better look at them, and suddenly I can hear voices in my head. They don't sound like voices I ever heard before too, and it's almost like my own voice but different. And I keep hearing different things that haven't happened yet. I hear about the birth of my son and know that it's going to be a boy. I know exactly what he's going to look like, how my career's gonna go, what my wife's gonna do, and some of the hardships that come up and who's gonna pass away in my family. It actually makes me incredibly emotional at this point, and I almost feel like it's too much and start to cry a bit. I ended up kind of just becoming overwhelmed with my emotions, and I fall back into the dirt and stare up at the sky. The sky's very bright today, and it actually looks quite nice. After a moment, I kind of stop hearing the voices so much. They kind of just slowly fade out, like somebody slowly turning down the volume on a record, and I get up. I realise now that whatever these things are has gone now, and I'm just here alone, very confused as to what's actually just happened to me. I get up, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation for this. I ended up scouring around for probably another hour and a half until I conclude that nothing's here. That's when my panic finally catches up with me, and I decide that I need to get back as quick as possible. I start making my way there. I eventually get back to the station and immediately write down my report. I didn't speak to anybody else about what had happened, and that's when I'm confused. I suddenly realised that what I was reading was very similar to some of the reports of what had happened years before, the ones where that people had considered the guys that were reporting it a little bit crazy or seeing things. And for that reason, I actually took the report and ended up throwing it into the trash. I didn't want my colleagues to think I was crazy. I mean, I didn't like most of them to begin with. I knew that this was going to hurt me moving on to the other areas that I wanted to work, so there was going to be no benefit of me actually posting this. And I ended up moving on and working as a ranger in different areas and doing different kinds of roles too, even being a fire service worker. Now here's the weird thing. I only realised it much later, but I did have a son, and he looked exactly like I knew he would. The job that I changed into is exactly what I heard I would. My wife's role too. Also, some family members that died, they were the exact people who I was told would do so as well. Now suddenly I felt kind of a weird fear come over me, almost like a wash and flood of emotions coming back, realising that something had contacted me back then, and for whatever reason wanted me to know what was going to happen. I can't put my finger on why this happened or how it happened to me. I just know what I saw was real, and that I wasn't the only person that saw those kinds of things out there. Lots of my other colleagues had experienced some very similar things, and I just don't know what to make of it all.